Welcome to part one of the Health and Wellness Conference. There's no way to speak about human health today without also speaking about the health of our planet. Over the last decades, we have seen a lot of changes in our world. Scientists in charting this human activity from the start of the Industrial Revolution in 1750 and the subsequent changes in the Earth system, such as greenhouse gas levels, ocean acidification, deforestation, and biodiversity deterioration, have given this era its own name, Anthropocene. The word combines anthro, meaning human, with scene, meaning epic, and refers to our time of human activity and the changes that activity have made to the planet. As long as we are reflecting on this unfamiliar word and its meaning, let's also review the meaning of two words that may be more familiar but are not completely clear: regeneration and sustainability. Regeneration is about healing and restoring, from the planet to our local communities. And sustainability is about keeping a healthy balance by creating economies and communities that thrive in alignment with our planetary systems. Part one of the conference will feature health professionals focused on connections between planetary health, human health, and the work of regeneration and building pathways to sustainability. I want to introduce Joshitha Sankam, who is a fellow with the Planetary Health Alliance. She is passionate about planetary health and will highlight relevant points from the global perspective of the Alliance, which is working to bring together a wide array of professionals to shape ways to find shared understandings of local and global relationships.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Joshitha Sankam. I'm a consultant in climate change and health at the Dyjack Center for Climate Change at the Indian Institute of Science and a Global Outreach Fellow at the Planetary Health Alliance. I'm going to be presenting a note on planetary health. I'm going to have an overview of shared concepts, what planetary health is, and the note on our planet, our health, and also the great transition. Several holistic approaches exist to safeguard health, and three of the most influential concepts are planetary health, One Health, and eco-health. When we talk about public health, it refers to all organized measures to prevent disease, promote health, and prolong life among the population as a whole. And then we have global health, which is the health of the population in the worldwide context. And then we have One Health, which is an integrated, unifying approach to balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and the environment. Planetary health is the achievement of the highest attainable standard of health and equity worldwide through judicious attention to the human systems, political, economic, and social, that shape the future of humanity, that define safe environmental limits within which humanity can flourish. Put simply, planetary health is the health of human civilization and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. The Planetary Health and the Planetary Health Alliance were launched with the 2015 report of the Rockefeller Foundation Lancet Commission. We are now in the Anthropocene, which is characterized by humanity's dramatic impact on Earth's biophysical conditions. So planetary health maintains a sharp focus on human health while blurring the boundaries between humans and all life with which we share this planet. We have to realize that by harming our natural systems, we harm ourselves and future generations. The future health of the planet and human health are strongly intertwined. We need to understand and act upon these challenges, which calls for a massive collaboration across disciplinary and national boundaries to safeguard our health. Public health plays a critical role in ensuring a sustainable future. There's no public health without planetary health. We have a lot of changes happening currently with the increased natural disasters, the biodiversity shifts, rapid urbanization, the changing food systems, water scarcity, the changing land use and land cover, the global pollution, and the changing biogeochemical place. All these have an impact on human health. These impacts include, but are not limited to, non-communicable diseases, infectious diseases, mental health, nutrition, civil strife, and displacement. In order to tackle these problems, we need a new scientific lens, which includes underlying drivers such as societal values, consumption, demographic shifts, technology, and the ecological drivers, which all lead to health effects. We are in an ecological paradox. The state of human health and that of our planet's natural system have been trending in opposite directions. We have been borrowing against the health of the future generations. Planetary health is a frame for the Sustainable Developmental Goals. Planetary health is a framework for the UN SDGs from both local and global perspectives, as it can help spur positive solutions for a more equitable, just, and livable future. I would also like to have a take on the SDG wedding cake, which was designed by the Stockholm Resilience Center. You can see that the foundation layer of the SDG wedding cake is represented by the biosphere, symbolizing the crucial role of a healthy environment and biodiversity in supporting and sustaining all the other sustainable developmental goals. How are we going to achieve this? Achieving planetary health requires learning to do nearly everything differently, such as how we produce and consume food, manufactured products, how we construct and live in our cities, how we manage our natural landscapes and resources, and finally, the stories we tell ourselves about our place in the world, our relationship to nature, and what it means to live a good life. Many of our best efforts today remain siloed, fragmented, or rivalrous. I would like to end saying it will take all of us. We all have a role to play. The policymakers, the activists, the researchers, the doctors, the writers, we all need to come together in a multi-sectoral approach for both human health as well as the health of the planet. We need to come to common terms, objectives, and visions for the future. Thank you.
While the Planetary Health Alliance is a global organization, we have many national agencies and organizations that have been working hard for some time to educate, advocate, and lobby for change here at home, as well as a growing number of programs working to directly address challenges with innovations and active citizen engagement and actions that can put us on the pathway to better human and planetary health. Here are a few highlights on sector contributors. Government's contribution began with the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency by executive order of Richard Nixon in 1970. Today, the infrastructure bill, which includes replacing lead pipes to provide clean water, cleaning up legacy pollution, and ushering in a new era of clean energy, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which will help reduce America's carbon emissions 40% by 2030, were established by the Biden administration. The businesses sector is increasingly focused on how to create a triple bottom line that simultaneously protects people, the planet, and prosperity, while new businesses are emerging to both help them in this transition and serve as models of new practice. Colleges and universities in general are increasing research for solutions, and schools of public health in particular are increasingly focused on education to prepare professionals to respond to climate impacts on citizens, such as food insecurity resulting from droughts, weather-related disasters that can displace millions of people, heat waves, floods, and rising temperatures, which have made us all more vulnerable to disease outbreaks and the spread of pathogens, old and new. These logos represent just a few of the many highly missioned organizations and nonprofits working on all aspects of engagement in protecting the natural environment and developing solutions for communities that can help us make the transition to a healthier future. They are generally led by dedicated citizens and volunteers and are a tribute to the civic responsibility of citizens working on behalf of the common good. One of these organizations, the National Environmental Health Association, is led by Dr. David Dyjack. Dr. D, as he is known, wanted to share some thoughts on his personal journey, some perspectives on his work, and suggestions on how you should view environmental issues and their impacts.
I believe this country is at an isthmus, and you are the hiker that is viewed in this photograph. It's you and I together that need to escort our country from where we are today into the future. A future that protects and promotes the health, safety, and financial security of everybody, everywhere. The year I was born, and no, I'm not going to tell you what year that was, the world population was 3 billion. Today, it is 8 billion. Early in my career as an environmental health professional, I used to measure carbon dioxide in the environment because I was an indoor air quality specialist and wanted to track these things. Early in my career, there was 350 parts per million of CO2, carbon dioxide, that I would measure in and around the urban environment in Washington, D.C., where I started my adventure in public health. Today, the background concentration is 425 parts per million, some 20% increase. While the world's population has almost tripled in my lifetime, carbon dioxide concentrations have come up, and the world is changing. The question is, how do we proceed? And the Anthropocene era. What I mean by this is the era of man. Most of you took geology in high school. You remember the Precambrian era, the Paleozoic era, the Mesozoic era, and others. Today, we have the Anthropocene, that is the era of human beings. As you look at these photos on the slide, one thing that you will notice for those that are schooled in public health and environmental issues is that they are uniquely designed to transmit disease. They are uniquely designed to challenge the health and safety of everybody everywhere. What do I mean by that? Look at that green strip along the side of that community. This is a community in California. That little green strip creates conditions under which ticks can migrate, ticks that carry Lyme disease. And that small patch of forest is adjacent to homeowners and the residents and children of those communities. Mosquitoes can breed in little caps of water, tiny little droplets, and those mosquitoes, called Aedes aegypti, can spread diseases like Zika and dengue, ones that many of us are familiar with. As we develop the earth, as we get involved in mining and agriculture, we are creating the conditions under which not only do we benefit, but we introduce risks to every occupant of our country and the planet. We often read in the newspaper or in your favorite blog site, or maybe you hear about on your most interesting podcast about political, religious, and economic refugees. For those of us in the U.S., those places in countries like Syria and Iraq and Somalia seem so far away. They're half a world away. The picture that you see in front of you was taken by my daughter. She was working as part of her education program on an internship, which put her on the border between Colombia, South America, and Venezuela. What you see are economic refugees leaving Venezuela and heading to Colombia and possibly destined for the United States. What my daughter said to me, and she's a nurse, is that what struck her about these refugees is that they were middle-class people. They were people that owned homes. They were people that drove reasonably nice cars. This photo wasn't taken a decade ago, just a couple of years ago. And she said, "Dad, this could be any one of my friends or any one of your friends escaping the extreme conditions in Venezuela." I took these pictures myself less than 1 year ago. I was in a place called the Dried Tortugas, which is a little island, there's an archipelago some 70 miles west of Key West, Florida. Little islands in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And do you know, while I was there, 75 Cuban refugees came ashore. 75. And Homeland Security was there to meet them. You can see the boats that they floated in on the right. Little dinghies, homemade craft that they would use to float from Cuba to the United States. This is the world that we're currently in. And I think about my own experience as an environmental public health professional and Hurricane Katrina. Over 1 million people were displaced during that major storm event. 400,000 alone from the city of New Orleans. And those individuals were dispatched to various parts of the United States as they sought a better life. So in this era of human conditions controlling the planet, we too are controlled by the environment around us. I am an environmental public health professional. I am one who is concerned with both the natural and the built environment because it affects human health. And if there's nothing else I ask that you remember from this presentation, is that things related to health and the environment are profoundly local. Did you know that 80 to 90% of your health status is in your hands? It's the food that you eat, the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, how you approach your life and your lifestyle. 80 to 90% of your health is in your hands. It is predicated on the food that you put in your mouth. How much more local can it get than you controlling what you put in your mouth? In my particular lane of work, I control mosquitoes and ticks. That's referred to as vector control. I assess the water that comes out of your tap. I'm interested in the quality of your housing. I assess early childhood education. Do you know that children spend some 14,000 hours in schools before they graduate with a high school degree? I, in my profession, assess those places to ensure that they're healthy and safe for everybody. I work in spas and pools and beaches. Anybody from Florida knows about harmful algal blooms and how they've affected the quality of water and beaches and wildlife in the Gulf region of the United States. Many of us enjoy tattoos, and there are many risks associated with getting a tattoo. And of course, recent developments in cannabis edibles and just wild animal control. The environmental health profession touches everybody everywhere. We consider ourselves as the chief science officers. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask you to step up to be a chief science officer in your community, no matter what your background is, no matter what your age is, no matter what your educational preparation is. You have the ability to impact the health, safety, and security of your communities. I'd like to spend just a few minutes hyper-focusing on what all of us can do to be better stewards of the environment and to invest in ourselves so that we live long, healthy, productive lives. The first one is I would ask each of us to consider adopting a plant-based diet. You don't have to be a vegetarian every day. For those of you who enjoy barbecue, you are not going to be criticized by me. But please understand that as we think about energy and energy systems, 30% of the world's energy is expended growing food. Almost 30% of the total greenhouse gases are related to the food system, and 80% of those greenhouse gases are related to livestock production, that is, pigs and chickens and cows. 70% of all the water use in our country and most of the world is related to agriculture and the production of food. And of course, the leading cause of deforestation worldwide relates to the food system. If you decide to consume a plant-based diet, you get many benefits. You'll be much less likely to be obese, and you will be much less likely to have hypertension, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol. You're much less likely to develop diabetes and other chronic diseases. And those people that eat mostly plant-based diets are at less risk of certain cancers, such as colon, prostate, and lung cancer. We are in a new era for drinking water in the United States. For the last several years, we're depleting drinking water and water that we could use for agriculture much faster than it's being replenished by precipitation and rain. In some parts of California, the ground has subsided some 28 feet. Imagine that, losing 28 feet in elevation because so much groundwater is being removed from ground aquifers. And for that water that does exist on the surface, we're increasingly finding that it's contaminated with a chemical called PFAS. This is an endocrine disruptor. It has many health impacts. And what we're concerned about is that it exists almost everywhere throughout the country, as you can see on the map on the right. We find that most local fish caught in rivers and streams and lakes and ponds have this PFAS chemical in it. We need to think differently and act differently as we work with water. What I do know is that every drop counts. Mark Twain once said, "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over." You can agree or disagree with him, but what I know is in this Anthropocene era, Every drop of water counts. Do you know for each pound of beef, we consume 1,800 gallons of water? For each pound of pork, it takes 576 gallons of water to grow and process that. For chicken, it's 518 gallons. For tofu, a soy-based product, it's only 300 gallons. We need to think wisely about our individual choices because it says a lot about us and our care for the environment. Let's also minimize the use of single-use plastic. Water bottles are particularly egregious, and if you want to see me get my blood pressure up, bring out a plastic water bottle. Americans consume or use 50 billion water bottles a year. That's about 13 bottles per person per month. And only about 30% of those bottles are recycled. The picture in front of you, I took in West Africa a couple of weeks ago. There, they collect water bottles and they simply burn them by the side of the road. In the United States, we just simply bury the bottles. Most of them are never recycled, even though you may put them in the blue bins. So think about that. Get a permanent water bottle. By the year 2050, 70% of us will live in big cities. 70% of us. We're no longer a suburban and rural country. People are moving to big cities in droves. And what I would encourage you, whenever you can, carpool or cycle, walk or use public transportation. What we know is that people that walk to work get a benefit from regular physical activity. They also get a release of endorphins, which are good for mental health. This is a mood-lifting substance that is released from your endocrine system. Be wise with the type of car if you purchase one. I drive a Toyota Prius. I've had it for 13 years, and I'm still getting close to 50 miles per gallon. I'm not against you owning a car or anybody owning a car, but let's be wise stewards with our resources. We do want to practice the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle, and I'd like to focus particularly on the reduce. Do you know that most clothing purchased today is discarded within a year? That's what I mean by reduce. Let's reduce our reliance on throwaway clothing and chasing the most recent styles. Always try to practice the reduce, reuse, and recycle. I want you to know that our information ecosystem is just as important as the environment ecosystem around us. What I've observed in the last 5 years or so is the distribution of dis and misinformation. We need to understand that our relationship to information is emotional. You also need to tend to your own information garden. You need to be reading and digesting and participating with groups that are reputable sources of environmental and ecological and societal information. And where there are weeds, keep them out. Where there are things that are technically incorrect, I think it's incumbent on each of us to keep those out of our lives. Ensure that the truth plants thrive and that the information that you're exposing yourself is accurate, is actionable, is authentic, and most importantly, is culturally competent. That is, it's understandable and engaging to the people around you. It doesn't matter if you're right, if the individuals around you don't understand contextually what you're talking about. So I encourage each of us to do what we can around mis and disinformation, around global climate change, around energy consumption, around a vegetarian diet, around being wise with our water use, and around active transportation. This is my board of directors a few years ago. Do you know my association, the National Environmental Health Association, did not ever go to Washington, D.C. to advocate for ecology, for environment, and for the environmental health workforce. When I was hired in 2015, one of the first things I did was to bring my board of directors that you see in front of you to Washington, D.C., so that they could speak with influencers. They could be advocates for the environment, and they could speak to their elected officials in a way that would be inescapable. You need to educate yourself and others on environmental issues, but don't keep it to yourself. You need to share that in a way that resonates with people that you know and that you love. There is a businesswoman in Orlando, Florida. Her name is Jo Newell, and I like the way Jo approaches life. She suggests that your attitude determines your altitude. And I think Jo's onto something. The words you speak become the house you live in. How you respect and comport and deport yourself and honor people around you are really critical. I encourage you to surround yourself with good friends and mentors and sponsors. Friends to keep you grounded, mentors to guide you, and sponsors to advocate for you. And have a growth mindset and choose to see the challenges that all of us face in society today. I look forward to working with you as we make this world a better place.
Next, we will hear from another health professional, John Stoddard. John is a member of Healthcare Without Harm and Practice Green Health, two organizations working across healthcare to advance sustainability in the sector. They have organized virtual cohorts that guide broad engagement in programs that include, among them, greening the operating room, climate resilience planning, sustainable procurement, and cool food. John is the leader of the latter cohort and will share the goals of the organization and his work.
Today, I'm going to talk about the work of Healthcare Without Harm to reduce the healthcare sector's impact through food initiatives. Healthcare Without Harm was founded over 25 years ago based on the belief that as the only sector with healing in its mission, healthcare has an opportunity to use its ethical, economic, and political influence to create ecologically sustainable, equitable, and healthy communities. Our mission is to transform healthcare worldwide so it reduces its environmental footprint, becomes a community anchor for sustainability, and a leader for the global movement for environmental health and justice. We conduct research, model strategic interventions, and provide guidance and resources to spread and accelerate best practices in the field. Healthcare Without Harm includes a membership arm, Practice Green Health, which supports hospitals and healthcare system to reach their sustainability goals. Practice Green Health has about 1/3 of all U.S. hospitals in its membership and advises and supports the healthcare sector's work in 12 areas, including green building, safer chemicals, climate and health, food, and more. Our Healthy Food and Healthcare program was launched in 2005 and works to harness the expertise, purchasing power, and investments of the healthcare sector to advance the development of a sustainable food system. We believe that hospitals are influential institutions in their communities with the power to affect social, economic, and environmental determinants of health in their communities and promote greater sustainability, equity, and health in the way that food is not only produced, but processed, distributed, consumed, and disposed of. We use an environmental nutrition framework which holds healthy food cannot be defined by nutritional quality alone. It's the end result of a food system that conserves and renews natural resources, advances social justice and animal welfare, and builds community wealth and fulfills the food and nutrition needs of all eaters now and into the future. Our guidance for healthcare comes in the form of our Healthy Food and Healthcare Standard. The standard has specific goals and actions in these 6 areas. Today, I'm going to be talking about our Plant Forward Future program. But first, I wanted to start with why do we care about food and climate? Why is this an issue that Healthcare Without Harm addresses and brings to the healthcare sector to address through its purchases? We know that food contributes 23 to 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. These 2 studies show that we will not achieve global climate targets without addressing food. So even if we had met the climate goals in all other areas of the economy, food would take us over the threshold to catastrophic climate change. You can see on the right this graph, which shows different interventions from food. All of them would get us down into that purple line. What I'm going to talk about today is diet. That's what along that green line. And what they mean by healthy diet is close to what we might think of as the Mediterranean diet, where we're not eliminating animal products, but we're reducing them and highlighting vegetables and plant proteins much more. Here's another snapshot of where emissions come from in food. The majority of where our emissions are coming from food is in production. That's everything from the red line down to the brown line. That's why we focus our work on food purchasing, because that's directly related to food production. This is from the World Resources Institute. This shows the differences between animal proteins and plant proteins, and the measures they're looking at are land use, water use, and greenhouse gas impact. The orange line is the greenhouse gas impact, the blue line is water use, and green would be land use. And you can see here on the left side, the plant proteins have a much lower impact. This is also a food security issue. As we're looking at a growing population reaching 10 billion people by 2050, we're going to need land in order to grow food for those folks. And raising animal proteins and focusing our diets on animal proteins is wasteful. It's incumbent upon the higher income countries to start reducing their meat and animal product intake. This is a snapshot of greenhouse gas emissions in healthcare. You can see that they're organized into 3 scopes. Scope 3 is the largest source of emissions for healthcare. That's essentially supply chain emissions. So the emissions that a healthcare entity would be accountable for based on what they're purchasing. And you can see here, meat procurement is part of Scope 3, which is another reason why we have our Plant Forward Future program. The program that helps hospitals reduce their purchases of animal products. We define Plant Forward as not necessarily vegetarian or vegan. It's a diet that celebrates plants while animal products play more of a supporting role. We have 3 programs. Plant Powered 30. This is an employee engagement activity for healthcare employees. It challenges them to eat a plant-forward lunch every day for 30 days. And it comes with 30 days of content to keep hospital employees engaged in the challenge. We have our healthcare culinary contest. Every year it runs from October 1st through November 30th. And this challenges healthcare chefs to create and submit a plant-forward dish. We have 4 finalists and a winner, and they all get nice prizes. The finalist gets to be featured at our Clean Med conference that occurs every May. We honor the contest winner there, as well as the Menus of Change conference put on by the Culinary Institute of America. Lastly, Plant Forward Future has Cool Food, and this is the program I'm going to focus most on today. The Cool Food Pledge is an international cross-sector pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from food purchasing. We are a partner in Cool Food. You can see our logos on the bottom. The World Resources Institute is the secretariat of the pledge, and we have partnered with them to support healthcare in meeting the pledge goals. This is a snapshot of some of the folks in Cool Food. You can see private sector in the top left, the municipal or cities in the bottom left, in the top right are universities or higher education, and then the bottom right are healthcare. We have currently about 114 hospitals enrolled in Cool Food. So how does Cool Food work? You pledge to a science-based goal. You develop a plan to meet the goal and promote the success. The goal of Cool Food is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2030. That goal is based on the Science Based Targets Initiative that estimated the greenhouse gas emission reductions we need in every sector of the economy. For food, they estimate that we need a 67% reduction by 2050. The idea behind Cool Food is to put us on a pathway to get halfway there by 2030. The first step for Cool Food is pledging. You sign a pledge and then you submit your data. And we collect data every year on plant and animal protein purchases. And you can see a screenshot here of the data collection sheet. Once you submit your data, you'll get a report back. This report shows your purchases broken out by category, and that is juxtaposed with your emissions broken out by category. You can see for this hospital, their ruminant meats, which would be beef and lamb, are only 4% of their purchases, but they're 37% of their emissions. What this foundational information does is it gives you the information needed to move forward with a plan. So you're seeing where your emissions are coming from, and then you can say, where do I make some changes in my menus in order to reduce this impact? What you'll also see in your report is change over time. So you can see how this hospital's purchases changed over 4 years. And then you'll also see how your emissions change over time. This hospital was able to achieve a almost 13% reduction in their emissions over 4 years, and their emissions per plate or per calorie by 8.14%. You'll also be able to see how you are progressing towards the goal. Finally, you'll see where you land among the cohort members. So you can see where you are against your sector and where you are against the whole group, and measured against the average North American diet as well. The primary resource for Cool Food is the playbook. This playbook looked at behavior change research to see how we can encourage diners to make a plant-forward choice. There are 5 areas in the playbook. In each area, there are different interventions that you can use to encourage diners to make a plant-forward choice. We also have resources to support hospitals and Cool Food on our Plant Forward Future webpage. They're everything from marketing resources to implementation resources like recipes, and we have tracking resources as well. Here's a little example of some of that guidance that we might provide. Language is important. So you can see here at the bottom, do's and don'ts around what to use on a menu and what not to use on a menu. Terms like vegan and vegetarian might identify what's in a dish. However, those terms often tend to be identities for people, or people think of them as identities. You might turn them off just with the word vegan, even if they might actually like the dish itself. So we encourage folks not to use these terms on the left, but do talk about what's the dish taste like? Is it going to be satisfying? What will it remind you of? Was it grandma's lasagna? Sounds a lot better than vegan lasagna. It sounds more inclusive. This study up in the top right showed just by changing a dish's name, its sales increased or decreased. We do have a tool on our website for naming and describing dishes. We call it Selling the Sizzle, and it takes you through the steps of naming dishes so that when you do introduce plant-forward dishes to your menu, that they're going to be successful. In Boston, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center created a forecasting tool. So when they made changes to their menus, they showed, okay, if we reduce this product and increase this product, and they also added a protein content per meal so that they can maintain protein levels while also changing dishes in order to reduce the climate impact. So you can see the originals on the left and what they ended up on the right. They looked at their dish names and made them sound more appealing, and taking away those identifier words like vegetarian or vegan. I think it took a while to get their chefs on board with this, but once the chefs understood that plant forward didn't mean vegan, didn't mean vegetarian, it just meant reorganizing and rethinking animal product centered diets, they found it was a way for them to be more creative. Then we have University of San Diego Health. You can see clearly here that UC San Diego has created beautiful meals. They have beautiful displays. All of this is marketing in order to help folks make a plant-forward choice. And they also trained their front of house staff as to how to sell these items and really just increase the variety of the plant-forward dishes that they had. And you can see what happened with this hospital. The changes they made helped them reduce their emissions by 29.67 per plate. And with that, I will thank you for your time and encourage you to get involved with Cool Food. You're welcome to join. It's coolfood.org.
While the value of John's work is evident, the topic of sustainability is perceived as equally important among young professionals, those currently studying for their medical degrees. We'd like you to meet Andrew Schumacher, who is the communications lead for medical students for a sustainable future. Andrew will share his story and the mission of the relatively young but growing organization.
My name is Andrew. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I'm also the newsletter sub-chair for Medical Students for a Sustainable Future. I'm here to share a little bit about what this group of medical students is doing to come up with climate solutions in the healthcare sphere from a young leadership perspective. Who are we? 4SF, it's a network of over 800 medical students. This is a little bit of an outdated picture. I think we're in every state now. We're largely online. That's what this is showing here. I was founded in 2019. I came across it in 2020 when I began medical school. And I found it on social media and reached out. In no time, I was in a leadership position trying to help the organization. I want to talk a little bit about how climate change is affecting human health now. When I first learned about it, was very focused on what's going to happen when the temperature surpasses 2 degrees Celsius and we enter a spiral that can't be stopped. However, what I've learned since being part of this group is that the effects of climate change are affecting humans now. There's primarily 5 ways listed here. There are more. As the planet warms, there's a huge increase in the amount of heat-related illnesses. I can speak to Philadelphia and how it primarily affects the socioeconomic classes that are more disadvantaged. For example, North Philadelphia is a primarily concrete and asphalt landscape and not a lot of tree canopy. And so on any given day, summertime, in those sections of the city, it might be 10 degrees warmer than a adjacent neighborhood a few miles away with some tree cover. That's only going to get worse as the temperature gets warmer. Also, as the temperature gets warmer, infectious disease and particularly zoonotic organisms are going to be found in more places than we typically see them. Malaria, tick-borne illnesses, we expect to see those more frequently in the southern hemisphere and further north in the northern hemisphere, basically further from the equator. That'll be a significant healthcare burden, and we're already seeing the extreme weather events, wildfires, and flooding as a pretty significant impact on our infrastructure and on our healthcare system. Air quality with pollution and wildfire smoke this last summer was pretty epic, with the smoke from Canada sweeping through the East Coast and into the Midwest of the United States. I don't know if there's been any research or data on that yet, but those poor air quality days probably exacerbated the asthma and COPD of people who already have lung disease. Within MS4SF, we split our organization up into these 5 teams primarily. The curriculum team is focused on getting climate and health conversations going inside medical schools. This is a group of medical students who are advocating at their local schools and also putting together materials that can be taken to deans and other curriculum folks at medical schools to try and get the conversation moving. We need to be talking and addressing these things in medical school. Our research team is pretty self-explanatory. These are students that are doing climate and health research and are getting published in academic journals. Our climate smart healthcare team is primarily focused on addressing the actual carbon footprint of healthcare as a whole. We're going to be working in these hospitals and outpatient clinics and trying to think through and create solutions and ideas about how we can lower the carbon footprint of the places that we work and care for patients. The advocacy team keeps a close eye on what's going on in Washington, D.C. and at the state and local levels, and organizing op-eds and other sorts of ways we can get that message out about climate and health from our medical student perspective. The partnerships team reaches out and keeps us abreast of what other organizations in the climate and health sphere are doing. They keep us abreast of conferences that are happening, as well as providing support for the local chapter. Part of MS4SF's goal and mission is to have individual chapters at every medical school. And at my school, I found out about MS4SF and didn't have any student-led sustainability club or group. So I got some like-minded students together and formed a sustainability club. Other campuses are doing sustainability stuff, and now they can tap into the support and national network of MS4SF. This is the Climate Health Curriculum Reform in Medical Schools. This was done by our curriculum team, like a step-by-step guide for how to get the conversation rolling at your institution about how to talk about climate and health. It's pretty full-fledged. It's a great resource. I'm impressed by the work that the students did on this. Another thing that students have done is this podcast called Code Green, the Climate Smart Health Professional. Last month, they launched their 10th episode. A few different students, along with the founders of MS4SF, have interviewed other experts in the field of climate and health, specialists and researchers, talking about practical ways to reduce emissions and office-based practice or hospital-based practice. These are some other organizations that MS4SF gets some inspiration from and collaborate with from time to time. Practice Green Health They're a national organization that offers climate smart healthcare advice and consulting for hospital systems and medical practices to try to reduce their footprint and ways to do greener healthcare. Healthcare Without Harm is similar, but they're an international organization, so they put on conferences. Practice Green Health is actually an extension of Healthcare Without Harm. The Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, UCSF Center for Climate, Health, and Equity. Planetary Health Report Card is a offshoot organization by some students from MS4SF on their climate justice footprint, Columbia University's Global Consortium on Climate and Health Foundation. And there's many more. As a student, I was able to go to the Clean Med Conference in Pittsburgh in May of this year. I learned a good amount about who the players are in these climate and health spaces. Saw like engineering consulting firms that were providing advice to hospital systems. And this is just a slide that I wanted to draw attention to. It shows how a little bit of investment in cleaner, more efficient energy usage is really paying off from a cost-effective standpoint and also from a carbon emissions standpoint. This is just a cropped picture from a slide that I took at the conference, but this is through the Allegheny Health Network. They retrofitted all their lights in these two hospitals to LED lights. They cost them $125,000, and they got these rebates from the energy companies to do so. That $125,000 investment saved them $60,000 that year in energy savings, and it was already paid off in less than a year because of all the savings. That's a great just study of if you're thinking about being more efficient, the savings are going to be from a cost-effective standpoint and the emissions reduction. 2020 was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, so this video can show you what MS4SF is all about.
In 4 years.
In 3 years.
In 2 years.
In 1 year, I will be a doctor.
I worry about my patients who, like my mother, have severe asthma and struggle to breathe polluted air.
I worry about my patients who may be displaced from their homes due to climate change.
I worry about providing adequate care to my patients in future pandemics and natural disasters.
I worry about my colleagues who are not being protected while they put themselves on the line when a crisis hits.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that people suffer when scientific warnings are heard too late.
Climate change is a leading threat to global health in the 21st century.
Increasing infectious disease,
more frequent wildfires, droughts, and floods,
poor air quality,
heat-related illness,
mental health challenges,
and food insecurity.
All threaten to overwhelm the systems
that keep us fed, employed, and alive.
Climate change,
driven by fossil fuel pollution,
is already threatening our hardworking health systems and communities we love.
The last few months remind us
there are consequences when we deny warnings.
The last few months also prove we are all connected.
Prove humanity is undeniably tied together.
Prove that our biggest and scariest problems require collaboration.
On the other side of crises, there is opportunity.
There is resilience.
There's hope.
In 3 years.
In 2 years.
In 1 year.
In 1 month, I will be a doctor.
But this fall, I will vote.
I will vote remembering all those who risk their lives in a crisis to protect us.
I'll vote remembering we're all one community.
I will vote to protect my patients who can't.
Join us in voting for leaders who respect science,
who heed the warnings of climate change,
who champion policies for a sustainable, healthy, and just future. We have the tools we need to reduce emissions and protect health.
We just need the political will to use them.
Join us
in voting for health,
for hope,
for humanity.
Our closing speaker for part 1 is coming from a different perspective, but one that is deeply relevant to the mindset needed to see the future healthcare system differently. Dr. Bon Ku, a program manager at ARPA Health and co-author of Health Design Thinking, Creating Products and Services for Better Health, believes that creativity is essential to how we build the health system from the inside out. He works with medical students to cultivate their creativity using the approaches of artists, architects, and most particularly, human-centered designers. Here is a clip from one of his more recent presentations.
What is creativity? And this is my favorite definition from Ken Robinson. He gave it in his TED Talk, which is actually the most popular TED Talk on there. It has over 50 million views. Some of you probably have watched this. And Why I think it's so popular, because I think it strikes a chord within us that creativity is important. And I think actually creativity is the most underappreciated skill in healthcare. And it's actually a skill that can be taught. So we know what creativity looks like, what it looks like in the arts and music and fashion, but what does it look like in healthcare? And for us, it comes across in teaching human-centered design to medical students. And it's been a fascinating process for us. 4 years ago, we started taking medical students out of a classroom like this, then started popping them into design studios and teaching them to think like a designer. We put them in architecture studios and had them think like architects. Here they're planning what a med-surg floor might look like in a hospital across town. And this is this simple kind of recipe or process that we follow. We develop empathy for the end user. We encourage our students to prototype a solution rapidly and to test it out. And another core process is this process of co-creation, of inviting patients into the process and learning how to design with them in mind. Because often medicine is very paternalistic. It's, I know what's best. And having patients come into our conversation has really been a game changer for us. It's something that wasn't trained to do, and it's been very inspiring bringing in the end user of healthcare into the conversation. We have our medical students ask grumpy physicians all the time what keeps them up at night, what are their pain points, to develop empathy for doctors and physicians as well. Here's what our process looks like before we go into developing solutions. We do a lot of understanding what the problem is. And we don't do that well in healthcare. For all that training, those 22 years of taking those multiple choice question tests, we think we know the answer a lot. This is an uncomfortable process for many physicians to take a step back and go, what exactly is the problem? So we force our students into this process. And we do a lot of prototyping, and it's thinking with our hands. These are students prototyping a solution through a storyboard. Here is mock-ups of a smartphone application teaching medical students how to perform point-of-care ultrasound. This was done not writing one line of code. We do a lot of skits as a form of prototyping. Here are students working with one of our faculty on an electronic identification system in the emergency department. So you don't have to communicate that idea through developing an actual physical product too, but you can act it out. So it's a lot of fun. A lot of our workshops that we do, they end up looking a lot like a studio in an architecture graduate school or a design studio. We're constantly having our students show their work and getting critique, and also learning from our mistakes and iterating on problems. For example, one team worked on a problem that I had. They were inspired by a case where a patient of mine that I diagnosed with sepsis in the emergency department had a bad outcome. She did not receive IV antibiotics and IV fluid resuscitation before going upstairs to admitted floor. They prototyped an analog solution, a checklist, because we suffer from alert and message fatigue in the hospital. We get all these messages that show up in our electronic health record system. Often we just ignore them. And so they were inspired by Atul Gawande's checklist on reducing errors associated with the operating room, and how his simple checklist actually saved lives and reduced errors. So here's a checklist that they prototyped of making sure we actually get the critical actions done before a patient leaves the emergency department and goes upstairs. So because I'm in the business of making doctors, I ask myself this question a lot, because the life cycle for making a doctor, as you can see, there's a lot of multiple choice question tests. So these first year medical students, it might be another decade before they actually go out into practice. So I have to think about what skills they need to practice medicine in the 21st century. And what we do know is that our superpower of memorization, that's going away. The machines are now smarter than us. Here's an example of EKG interpretation. If we have a read up on top. When I started training, we did not get that read. They're becoming a lot more accurate. And that happened because emergency doctors like myself were missing myocardial infarctions and patients were having bad outcomes. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. Things that involve pattern recognition, diagnostic imaging. I think we're going to have a wet read by a computer on a CAT scan or MRI or X-ray before even a human takes a look at it. We're going to see, I think, care become a lot more convenient, a lot more virtual, and actually care being delivered outside of the footprint of a hospital. So we know about telehealth. We could communicate with a doctor via smartphone at the convenience of our home, but even in the hospital, patients are having a virtual experience. Here's one of my colleagues doing teletriage. So she's not even in the hospital. She's like in a clinic somewhere else in Philadelphia and triaging a patient during our busiest times and putting in orders. What's been amazing about this process of applying human-centered design in healthcare, it really helps me and my colleagues to simplify this mess that we're in. And there's this transformation going on in healthcare right now. And there's a great opportunity for us to actually design it this time and not just let it happen. And I believe that applying creative problem solving through a design process can help us move the needle in healthcare, can help us get better outcomes and actually get more value in healthcare.
As our program grows, we will be hosting workshops on design, human-centered design, integrated design, ecological design, and regenerative design, all assets to shaping the pathways that lead to a healthier future. The program will be available to our channel subscribers. In part 2 of the Health and Wellness Conference, you will meet leaders with creative visions and new approaches we believe will stimulate your imagination about new possibilities.